This is Pops in the morning playing around. It's probably 11:15 here. Well, it's on the clock. I don't know what time it is. And it's cold. I got the heater on for all that's worth. Well, these siliconized gloves, I never used to like them. But now that I have to keep my hands warm, they do pretty good. But as you can see, I got it on one hand, not the other. I have to get for my rotund condition here. The sleeves are too long there. So we're working out something here. Anyway, on my tsx530, I figured I'd show you the final result. Yes, I left some rough spots there. The gasket's more than going to take care of that. But as you can see, you can just about barely feel it. So I left it. Why? Because I have a perfect circle around here, a good fitting around here, and I got a nice surface. And that's hand grinding on a flat plate of steel, 3/4 of an inch thick. I ran it on my platen sander. You could have somebody machine yours off, and that will I used 120 grit, and I did. I have a steel table here with a nice edge. Ran the paper across it, take the highs off of it, put it on the steel plate, just the upper half of this, ran it gently by hand, because if you start getting chatter, you start feeling it catch and twist, you're going to screw up your surface. It's got to be smooth, nice and smooth. And when you get a feel for it, you'll be able to press down to some extent. A couple of things I wanted to talk about on this one is your float level. When the bugger's upside down and the big body is off and your float is here, some people get confused on how to adjust the bugger. Well, the gasket off the top set, the top half of it, you're upside down, 1/4 inch between this face of the float, surface, and believe it or not, yes, the the highest point, which is going to be your solder and such, not the arm here, but the float, about 1/4 inch to the surface without the gasket. Now, why? Well, it takes it up high enough. If you put the gasket on there, well, now you've lost, 30/2 of an inch or so, and the floats are down. What's that do to the level? Yes, you have to be upside down. So if it's here and it comes up and hits the gaskets, it's not coming up level. The idea is to have it 1/4 inch from here to here level. You have to bend it in between the pin and the float in this area here. That's where you do your bending on that arm. Now, quite often what I will do is, if you can hold it, you bend it up. Now on this one, bend it up and then gently twist the other way. Now what you're looking for is a Z bend. And then when you go to take it out, you can press down and then push on the back. And you have to be careful. Now if you can do it with pliers, that's even better. But do not put any pressure on that pin at all. None. It's a neoprene or a Viton surface. Then you'll jam it, and you can break it, cut it, peel it, make a permanent indent in it. And the worst of it is a permanent indent can be a cut, where it'll hit the seat here, and it'll push the Viton material up, and the center of it down through. Well, now you got something that's broken, so it'll never hold again. That's why you don't pick this thing up. You hold it with pliers generally and then bend it where you want it. For me, I was able to hold it up. I put my 1/4 inch under here and was able to bend it down, hold the 1/4 inch still, and then fold it upward. So I was able to get somewhat of a Z bend. I don't think you can see it, but even there, I got a slight Z bend. So, but as you can see on the old set, they're pretty close as they were. Pretty darn close.
I'm going now.
Okay, have fun, love. Take care of my investment. She likes to go do a little workout when it's severely cold and she hates people and has a bad day, then she goes in the basement and works with what little equipment we have. She says, I'm 63. Who's going to be interested in me? I said, remember the last time we walked through the store and we had this conversation? Shut up. There's just something about her face, the look, the hair, and there are certain things about her that just catch a man's eye. There's just no way around it. And I knew that when I married her. I just had to accept the idea that You can't be jealous. You married a beautiful woman, well, and guys turn their heads and look, just smile and wink, and every once in a while, they'll smile at you and give you a thumbs up. True story. Had that happen more than once with Debbie. In our 50s and 60s. It's kind of funny. Now, anyway, to get back to the carburetor, get to your basic adjustments. Now, I'm not sure this one's exact, but it's a common one I do. All right, you're going to hold your throttle shut, turn your screw in until you feel it just move. Then what do? Back it off a half turn. Put your thumb or finger in here and hold it snug. Turn the screw till you just feel things start moving. Notice the location. Turn it in one turn between 1 and 2 turns. You can start with one. Now, in this one, the tsx530, all the recommended adjustments are idle, 1 turn, main jet, 1 turn. Well, I usually end up at a turn and a quarter, and in certain tractors, I've run into some of these at 1/4 turn, others 3/4 turn. So you start at 1 and then go from there. And this one the same, 1, but this one's a load. The only way you can do this without a load, you got to be climbing a hill or something. Notice how the tractor's running. And then you get off the tractor, park it, lock it, turn the adjustment screw, go down and go back up the hill again. You'll notice quite a bit even just letting the clutch out in high gear, how much snort you have and how the engine responds. Or if it's blowing black smoke, which is common, yeah, that's a turn open too dang far. Now this is a pretty coarse adjustment, so 1 turn's a good place to start. So you have 1 turn, and probably 1 turn. And it won't hurt if you're paranoid, like sometimes I like to be. Go to turn and a half. You're going to adjust it anyway. But the instructions say on the idle and the main jet, load jet, 1 turn. What's the other one? Remember I was talking to you before about tightening these screws in. I use blue Loctite. Now, hear that click? But you don't see much movement, and that's what we're looking for. And you want this plate fairly close to the shoulder. Crap doesn't get in there as easy. But you don't want it tight. It has to move free. The other one is, before you finish adjusting the screw, you back it all the way off while you're checking where it is. Push it with your finger and hold it, and while the screw's coming up, do you feel it go tick, click, like it's catching? Well, that's a problem. Just try and barely loosen the screws up. Turn it straight up and move it with your fingers if you have to. And you'll get it there. Quite often, though, if you push it shut, get the shaft in there, roughly where you want it, get the screws started. While the plate is in there, shaft is in there, take one screw down till it's snug. All right? You'll feel the shaft turn up. Because you can get your shaft straight up and down, start the screw, and then as the screw comes down, have the shaft match the plate. All right? Now, start wiggling things around a little bit. Get them settled. And you'll find out that maybe the screws are in the center of the holes, and maybe they're off a little bit, sideways especially. And then you'll get a feel for the plate being in a proper position. And this one has a slot for the idle jet down here and a number 15 up there. So you've got 2 markers to run it parallel to the bolt holes. And that makes it easier too. But you're looking for perfect, as possible, movement. Now this one, there's almost no play with the shaft. This has been done before. This shaft is probably not an original John Deere shaft, and it's in excellent condition. But we didn't know those things before we started monkeying around. Well, it looks like somebody did something there. But anyway, yeah, there's some wear out here on the other end. You wonder how there's wear out here on the other end. When the governor starts pulling things, it's pulling here, and things just kind of, not much gas goes by that end of it. Besides that, it's brass and cast. Now, there's some other soft plugs. I rarely pull these out if it's in there well. If you're going to replace this seal, you have to pull that. See if I still have it. Yep, I do. Yeah, little bugger. Yep, it's usually in there. Flush side against the seal, but you just barely want it in the casting because it gets in the way. Oh, look, somebody sends me another political pile of crap. So, those are the things you can work on. Now, last but not least, this didn't have an actual pipe plug in it. That was one I think I bought before. Remember I told you about when you're telling somebody numbers, be sure to tell them casting number. You can barely see it, but stamping number. They need to know those things. It's critical when you're talking to junkyard guys. It means something to them. And they may ask you directly, but be sure you tell them up front if you're looking for a matchup to anything. Even here on the 2272, it looks like 255. Now, to some people, that means something, but they also still need to know casting number, upper body. Those are important things. Use as few words as possible, as clearly as possible, because you can get into that. Well, do you really mean this, or did you really? Well, take your time. You know, if you have to, slow things down. Last but not least, when I'm getting into this, I told you about the choke plate sliding in there. Same thing with the screws and the choke plate. Get it in position. It's even harder with a choke plate. You got to get that puppy down there, and you have a spring on it. So you have to hold the spring in here, bring it up, you move your choke around, because unless it's almost perfect, you're not even going to be able to close the choke. So you're going to sit there playing around, get the holes lined up, and it still won't go down because they're not lined up perfectly. You get it down and quick, jam the screws in there. If you can find it, you get on the Snap-on truck with an old guy, or go online and look. One of the tool outfits, Amazon, Tooltopia, whatever. Look for a screw starter. There's Phillips and they're slotted. What do? Well, slotted, but the two middle twist, and they're spring loaded. You get my drift? So you put the screw in there, you turn it and locks it this way. You put the screw in it, give it a little push, and it releases, and the center two pieces twist. So there you are. It's held, and you can get in there and start the thing. You can't finish it, but you can generally start it. Now, without it, because I lost track of mine, I think it's in my road tool set. You get them down in there at least. Get them in there with a magnet. Start it. Sometimes you can turn it, and this magnet will start it. But when the stuff is new, the threads are poor because they've been chromed quite often, and they just doesn't work out. So you end up sliding it off, maybe even holding it with a screwdriver, sliding the magnet off, and then you'll be good. It was a struggle yesterday, but not terrible. I've had worse. Yes, I did tap those holes as well. 3/8 course, which is 3/8 18, I believe. And I went through the threads with it the other day. The only yesterday, the only one I didn't remember to go through with, and I have to check them, is both the needle and this little nut. And I can't say just a jam nut. So I wanted to show you something else about this. Was a Type C, I think they call it. There's several different types of main jets for these things. In fact, some of them, where you see this casting here on a lot of the Fords, this main jet isn't here. It comes down through on a long screw here, and the jet's in the bottom of the carburetor. Literally screw in, screw out jet. And it's pretty funky. It works good. It's easy accessible, and it doesn't hang out and get bent like these often do, but still, it's a different style jet. And there's another version that I couldn't remember in the paperwork. You see. Okay, there's your float adjustment. Tell you from the gasket surface to the float. Give you the instructions how to do it. Marvel Shebler Type Jet A. There isn't any. Fixed jet. Okay, so that's the other one. There you go. Well, you can't see it well, but this is Type A, fixed jet. This is Type B. Now, I was talking about that screw with the long needle. It goes all the way in the bottom. And then there's this one, the external main jet down there. And this is the main jet, complete. Let me show you. There it is. The threads are up in further where that long tube is. The tube screws all the way up, and then there's some threads behind it still. That screws into the same threads as your long tube. This is a jet, and a hole in the tube is somewhat of a jet. It's much larger than that. Now, this thing here is not threaded for the needle at all. The needle can go in and bottom out. There it is. Take it in and out. This isn't just a packing nut. It is a packing nut. Packing goes in there. It's a huge hole. And down below it is where a packing goes. Screw that puppy in there and then turn this out and hold it. The two threads are different. The outer are finer than the inner, so you can get yourself into trouble with one going too far. But it'll go into about that depth without a packing, and then you can take your main jet in there, your main screw in there, and then that'll bottom out in the hole. These are your feeds on the side here. On each side, and you look at them carefully. This one shows signs of it. I'm glad I didn't use it. I don't know if you can see it, but let me take the needle out, and then you'll be able to see it easier. Because this is one of the problems we have with these. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that really well. That's supposed to be a perfect hole, not an egg. You get them in there and they tighten them too tight because the washer that's normally here at this shoulder, right in there, doesn't seal because it's old, broken, or they put it in without it, thinking, oh, brass against cast iron, that'll seal. No. And they get it in there too dang tight and twist it. Will it still work? Probably. The problem isn't so much the twist here, that doesn't mean anything. The problem is down here you get misalignment between the seat that's on the other side of that hole where that needle sits, and you get misalignment between the two, and then you'll try and shut the thing off, and it'll... Now, strangely enough, here's an oddball one that I've run into a couple of times. Not very often, but I had got the warnings years ago. When you screw around with these things, Briggs & Stratton had a huge thing on it, bulletins left and right, because the idiots used to send through idle jets that were or idle screws that were aluminum with steel springs. So you didn't get a good feel for it. You go to turn the screw in and you feel it bottom out. Yeah, for aluminum, you beat it out. It cut a groove in it. And the funny part about the groove is it's going in this way, and then suddenly you pressed it in the hole, and you get that little whoopee behind it, like where my knuckles are. Yeah, instead of a smooth surface, you get a whoopee surface. And what they found out is it can make a rich condition where you just move it a little bit, and you open it up, and whew, fuel goes in there. But that edge in the back can also cause a problem, because some guys would turn it back and forth to seat it, and it wouldn't just make a smooth or a rounded edge that doesn't belong there. It'd actually make a cut shoulder, and it would lean out the mixture because it couldn't travel around the way it was supposed to. You're opening it up thinking it's going to do something, and then when it finally gets past that point, all of a sudden it rushes through there, and you have a horrible time. Briggs & Stratton they had a touchy governor, and you'd have a problem with it. You can have similar problems here. So be careful. Brass is better than aluminum, but still come up with the same problems. When I took this out, it was hard coming out. And you can tell by the hole that it was harder by twisting in, not coming out. But if you see the threads are shiny, it's because they're rounded over from crap that was in the carburetor. The previous carburetor, if you go into some of the other pictures I've shown on Facebook and Instagram before, a very rotten, rusty carburetor. I got it to work. The things are almost $1,000 a pop. Even if they're Chinese, they're around $750. So I spent a lot of time here with the amount that I charge, and he probably paid $300 when we got through with the carburetor. Nice working carb. Between his kits and my labor, which I didn't charge him much because it was a special tractor for both of us. It goes back to our childhood. More so him than me. He spent a lot of time on it, but they were neighbors. They were like family. Up on Ingram Hill in Binghamton, town of Binghamton, near Hollyton. So, to me, yeah, I'll charge him less. I did. I'm retired, right? Yeah, I need the money, but not that bad. So, those are some of the things to remember when you're playing with your jets, tightening them in. Finger tight. Another one, last but not least. Tightening these body screws. Full fist. Tightening the idle screw and the idle speed screw, 2 fingers. Just 2 fingers. So when you feel you get a resistance and your fingers slip, or you feel it and you stop. And you say, why? Because that's when you're adjusting the preliminary idle, you need to feel that it just hit here, and you can feel it slightly move here. as crazy as it sounds, you'll play with it. You'll understand what I'm talking about. All right, the only other mechanism that's anything of any importance is the choke. I put the last one on backwards, figured it out later. Oh crap, that doesn't work. This faces forward. The cable comes from the back and then hooks into here. So I had it actually working the other direction. Boy, trying to get the screws into the throttle, the choke plate that was going the wrong direction. I made it work. Never should have done it, but I made it work. So just be careful and note how things come apart. And I'm not even sure here in the picture it shows the choke linkage. It does not. I guess it does. And look at the way it shows the choke linkage. Is it on that picture? Yes, it is. Over here. Aiming the way I put it on there. And how about the other side? Same thing. Choke linkage. Aim towards the outlet. I put it on the right way, right? No. Not for a John Deere. For a Ford 600, Red Tiger Series, sure. So keep those things in mind. Ford puts their air cleaner to the back on their older tractors. John Deere with an M series and 400 or 420s and 40s and such. They are, well, the 40s and the M's anyway. I'm not sure about the 420s and up, but they had their air filter towards the front. So that's why that's carburetors aimed that direction. It's just an elbow right into the doggone air cleaner. In fact, the elbow is so short it's hard to get it out. All right then, last but not least, gasket. Guys like to put stuff on the gaskets. If you need to put stuff on it to hold it in place, you don't even want to put much of anything on there. High tack is probably the only thing I'd like to see on there. You see, well, no, wait, no silicone, nothing. Silicone's going to get eaten out by the gas going past it, and it'll swell. Don't. So, high tack will take it, but the idea is maybe just a smidgen of grease. But I think of high tack first, just a little. In other words, a little on the surface, a nice circle, and then a little bit on the, let it dry a little bit, and then stick the two together, but very, very light. Probably better off just spraying it. Make sure the surface is clean on the carburetor, and then they'll stick somewhat. But my own opinion for doing it, I rarely put anything on these anymore for one main reason. Anything you put on there other than high tack is going to, even silicone will soak into the gasket. It'll make it soft. You say, well, that'll make it seal better. Yeah, but if you go hyper and go to over torque, then you pinch it out here more than you pinch in here. And this end doesn't give as much because it's larger. And you're going to take those ears and break them, either on the manifold or on the carburetor. Don't. That's the other reason that I sand this off. Make sure that's flat. So even if the manifold might be pulled a little bit, well, then these aren't pulled as well, causing a leak. The manifold, I would take a file to them. You heard me. Get a small, short file and just run it with your hands in there. And if you're not trusting completely, wrap it with some of the 120 paper that I was talking about before. Sand it off. But you're better off with just a flat file. File it, turn the file over, file it, turn the file end, and just work it around until you think that it's nice. Because when it's bent and then you put it on a new surface, it'll help, but still it's bent. And your bolts are trying to go straight, and your ears are bent. Now you pull this, yeah, you can get into a big vacuum leak that you can't see. I've seen it a couple times, or it cracks. Well, let's just pretend this is the manifold. It'll crack right in here by the throat because it's pulled down. Well, then you pull it down and try and get it there. Yeah, well, it doesn't always work because of the gasket, and they tend to pop. And the other way it'll pop too is the opposite direction. They're bent, straighten them out, snap. Now what? It can get interesting from there. Yes, you know somebody that can braze it back together. That's great. You know, have them do it. Nickel weld it. And if you're careful, that'll work out great. You know another one that'll work? V it out and MIG weld it. You heard me. V it out and MIG weld it. And make her flat. How do I know? I did an exhaust manifold years ago because I put an exhaust manifold in a resurfacer I had. It was a CBN high-speed cutter. I got it all mounted, gave it a knock, and it seemed pretty good. Ran it across very slow. It was working good. I let it go back and forth with light cuts by itself. All of a sudden I heard ding, ding, ding. I said, oh crap, it's bouncing. And I went to get it and heard whack! It took one of my CBN cutters and blew it right off the head. And on the other side of it, it blew the end completely off the exhaust manifold. I heated it up with a torch. What I first did was got a plate to bolt it together, which is what you would do in this case, to bolt things where they belong. Got it bolted in place, V'd everything out, even pulled it back apart, V'd it out, and then took a torch and warmed the bugger up. Just on the end even, didn't even do the whole manifold, just on the end, and started welding with a MIG welder. It was an old snap-on MIG welder. By the time I got done, it looked pretty good, cleaned it up, and got it resurfaced, sent it back. And I told the parts company that had sent it to me for the customer, and I told him about it, and he says, holy crap, if you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have seen it. I kid you not. MIG with cast iron on a 454 Chevy motorhome exhaust manifold. And the customer looked at it when he told him. He says, well, apologies here, but if there's any problem, bring it back and he'll take care of it. That's what he mean. He said, well, he broke it. His machine smacked the end off and he welded it back together. Just wanted you to know. He says, if you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have seen it. He came back a year later and made a special point to tell Bobby Countryman at Countryman Auto Supply, and I got a phone call. A problem with it? And he says, no. He says, it's the first time he's gone 2 seasons without blowing gaskets out. I've done that a couple times. So it can be done. And what's the temperature you're looking for? Between 350 and 500 degrees for preheat. Much more than that, you're going to start trouble with the rest of it. So around 350, maybe as high as 500 when you're welding. So you start at 350, the whole area, everything, your mounting plate, the bolts, the nuts, the manifold, that end that you're welding together. And in my case, what helped was the whole thing end broke off, and when I was welding it back together, the seam was what was going together completely. There was nothing else, like it was cracked here, and then from halfway, there was no other attachment. It had to be bolted all the pieces together. And then that made the difference because it was expanding and contracting in the same area all the way around. So it made welding a breeze. And when it got on the manifold, steel and cast iron are almost identical in their expansion and contraction rates. I mean, they're so close, it's ridiculous. So it expanded and contracted. What's steel's core constituent? Iron. Cast iron. Get my drift? So, mild steel, no problem. Mild to moderate, it was fine. So here's the same thing can be done with a MIG welder if you're careful. Personally, I'd probably, on the manifold, I might think of brazing, but there's only one thing that keeps me away from brazing. Brazing doesn't do anything till 1400 degrees, so you have to heat everything up over 1000 degrees in that region, and you're going to get the entire manifold hotter. So preheat 350 to 500. Boy, I'm starting to get towards MIG welding, even flux core, because I've done that to some extent on very small cast iron parts completely broken off. V'd them out, preheat them, weld them together. And that would be another one that I would do, is if that air breaks off, finish it off, get it plated, double check against your carburetor, get it plated and held together, ground and V'd out, and either MIG weld it, flux core weld it, or 330 seconds. Go with the nickel, 99. You can do it with a 55 nickel. It's 99% nickel and 55% nickel. The 55 is what they call non-machinable. There's steel in it. 55% nickel. And it works good. It's high strength. It's stronger than 99. But it's not nearly as pliable as 99. And not nearly as forgiving on one hand, but it does weld very well. In fact, it starts welding closer to normal 6011, 6013. And I got some stuff here, 330 seconds, 99 nickel. It runs like MG500. It runs like MIG. It's beautiful. If you go to restart it, though, you restart it on something else because it doesn't restart well. Get it restarted, just a little blurb of a nice bead, and then you can start your weld, and the stuff works beautiful. I got it off of Amazon. Couldn't even tell you who. But those are some recommendations if you have to weld things back together. Why? These things drop. They fall. The carburetor, the manifold, any of those you could end up welding. Now, as you get closer to the exhaust manifold ears and such, because these are all one-piece manifolds, intake and exhaust, be careful. When you start seeing big rust pits in them, they call that burned-out cast iron. The carbon and even sometimes some of the casting goes away like sand, and you'll never, especially, I was told to braze one together on I think a D17 Alice, no hope. There was no hope. I tried for half a day one time and finally just had to give up, because when I got done, even I'd start brazing in an area and get it all in and try and keep heat on it and let it cool down slowly. Bink! Every time. Didn't matter what I did, how I did it, when I did it, covered it with rags, nothing. They said, do it on a tractor, run the tractor, get some preheat in it. I was like, no. None of it worked. So, why do they say do it on the tractor? Well, so it moves less, and when it does move, it's at the side of the head. So they're trying to keep the ports on the same plane. No, pull it off and replace it. Now, I've seen some of them where they're broken out. That's a different story. I've seen one where somehow an entire exhaust manifold on an old TO30, I think it was, broke out, and they brazed it entirely in all the way across. Big, huge patch. It worked beautiful. And the funny thing is, brass has a higher expansion rate and contraction rate than cast. But it did well in this case. I would have welded a piece of steel in there and said, have a nice day. But it was at BOCES. They were learning, and the guy that did the job did excellent work. Anyway, I'm going to end this for now and put her on YouTube. And if there's anything left over, I may even put it on Facebook. Coming up on 32 minutes and 21 seconds.